All right, so we're diving into Ryan Moran's 12 Months to $1 Million, and I'm super stoked to finally hit that last chapter about the big payday.
Yeah, this one was a really fascinating read.
Yeah, especially for our listener who's all about listeners' specific industry from their notes, right? This could be huge.
Absolutely. Moran's approach is all about setting yourself up for long-term success, not just a quick buck.
So it's not like sell out and retire to the Bahamas kind of thing.
Not exactly. It's more about building something with real value, something you could eventually sell for a life-changing amount.
And then use that to fuel whatever's next, right? Like you were saying, our listeners been dreaming of listeners' specific long-term goals.
Exactly. And Moran really nails it when he talks about the impact selling a business can have.
Beyond just the money, right?
Right. It's about the freedom it creates, the opportunities it opens up.
Which, let's be honest, is probably way more appealing than whatever yacht you could buy, right?
Totally. And Moran argues that having that end goal in mind, building a sellable business, actually makes you a better entrepreneur along the way.
Makes sense. You're forced to think bigger, be more strategic.
Exactly. And he doesn't sugarcoat it either. He's very clear that not just any business will fetch top dollar.
He lays out some pretty specific criteria, right?
He does 5 key things: consistent revenue growth, strong profit margins,
Okay, those make sense.
diverse sales channels, a recognizable brand identity, and then really solid systems and automation.
I'm guessing our listeners got the revenue and margins part down based on listeners' business type.
Yeah, they're definitely crushing it there. But you know what? I think the brand identity piece could be really interesting to dig into.
Oh, for sure. Especially in their niche, right?
Absolutely. Moran uses this example of Coca-Cola versus some generic soda to illustrate brand value.
But that feels kind of simplistic, right? Especially for what our listeners doing.
Totally. In their world, it's less about math appeal and more about building trust within a specific community.
So it's less about like flashy marketing and more about.
Reputation. Credibility. Think about competitive example from listeners' industry and how they've positioned themselves.
Yeah, they've nailed that specific characteristic of listeners' industry vibe for sure.
Exactly. And that translates to loyalty, which translates to dollar signs for a potential buyer.
Makes sense. So how does that apply to our listeners' current setup? Are they sending the right signals?
It's a good foundation, but I think there's room to grow. Moran talks about this idea of, let me see, yeah, crafting a narrative that resonates.
Storytelling. Always comes back to storytelling.
Right. It's about showcasing not just what you do, but why you do it. What makes you different?
So in their case, that could mean, what about tailored example specific to the listener's business?
Exactly. It's about hitting those emotional touch points that resonate with their ideal customer and ultimately their ideal buyer.
Totally. And that ties in beautifully with their goal of building something meaningful, right? Not just profitable.
Absolutely. Moran is all about that long game, building a brand that stands for something, which impacts the right people, which in turn drives value.
Love it. Okay, so strong brand check, but there's got to be more to maximizing the value of a business, right? What's the secret sauce?
He's got 5 strategies, actually. Increasing profitability, obviously.
Oh, yeah.
Building recurring revenue, strengthening your brand even further, diversifying risk, and then keeping those financials squeaky clean.
Okay, a lot to unpack there, but since we're all about actionable advice, what do you think we should focus on for our listener?
Given their goals, I'd say recurring revenue is KEY.
Okay, I'm intrigued. I mean, recurring revenue is good, but how does that specifically apply to their situation?
Think about it. Right now, they're doing a lot of listeners' current revenue model, right?
Right.
Which is great, but it requires a ton of listeners' current effort on their part.
Yeah, and that's not exactly scalable, right?
Not really, but recurring revenue, that's a whole different ballgame. Imagine if they could shift towards specific strategies relevant to listeners' industry.
Ooh, like detailed example tailored to listeners' business model. That would be amazing.
Right. Not only would that create consistent cash flow, but it would also show potential buyers that the business can thrive even without them.
Hold on, that perfectly aligns with their goal of eventually listeners' long-term goal. Mind blown.
I know, right? It's like hitting 2 birds with 1 stone.
This is way smarter than just building a business and hoping someone throws money at it someday.
That's what I love about Moran's approach. It's strategic. It's about building an asset, not just a business.
Okay, so we're seeing the bigger picture now, but building a business to sell, that's a long game. How far in advance do we need to be thinking about this?
Moran recommends at least 12 months before you actually want to sell.
Whoa, so this isn't a last-minute tramble.
Not at all. It's about giving yourself time to refine everything, polish those financials, really get your ducks in a row.
Makes sense. So where do we even start with all this?
He says planning early is crucial. Like, get a good business broker on board, someone who specializes in your industry.
Okay, check. What else?
And then knowing your numbers inside and out.
Okay, I think I'm good there, but how deep do we need to go? What kind of financial stuff should I be focusing on?
He says knowing revenue and expenses is great, but you need to go deeper. Think profit margins, customer acquisition cost, all those fancy metrics.
Okay, so it's about showing potential buyers that I understand the drivers of my business, right?
Exactly. It's about demonstrating business acumen, not just passion, that builds trust.
Love it. Okay, I'm feeling way more prepared for this big payday thing now, but we're just scratching the surface here, right?
Totally. Next time, we'll dive into the actual selling process, all the steps involved in making it happen.
I'm already excited for part two. Okay, so we've built this amazing business. It's got a killer brand. The numbers are solid. We're feeling good.
Now it's time to bring in the buyer, right? Seal the deal.
Exactly. But how does that actually work? Where do we even start?
Well, Moran breaks the process into three main stages.
Okay, lay it on me.
First, you've got valuation and listing. Then there's due diligence.
Due diligence sounds intense.
It can be. Well, we'll get to that. And then finally, it's all about negotiation and closing.
All right, step by step. So, valuation. How do we even begin to put a price tag on something like this?
Yeah, it's not like checking the Kelly Blue Book for your business, right?
Right. It feels way more subjective.
It is, but there are some frameworks. Moran suggests looking at industry multiples, seeing what comparable businesses have sold for.
Okay, so there's some data we can use.
Definitely. But you also need to factor in the intangibles, like brand strength, scalability, that unique it factor.
That's where our storytelling skills come back in, right? Painting that picture for potential buyers.
100%. And I think that's especially crucial for our listener. Given their niche, they've built something special, and they need to convey that.
Show, don't tell, right?
Exactly. Highlight those long-standing client relationships, the reputation they've built within the community.
It's about finding the right buyer, someone who truly gets it.
Totally. Someone who sees the long-term potential, not just the balance sheet.
Okay, so let's say we've got a solid valuation and a killer pitch. How do we actually get our business in front of these ideal buyers?
That's where the listing comes in. Moran's a big advocate for using a business broker.
Makes sense. They've got the connections, right?
Exactly. Think of them like a real estate agents for your business. They know the market, they speak the language, they can navigate the whole process.
So less headache for us.
Way less. Plus, they can help you craft a listing that really shines, highlights all your strengths.
Okay, so we've got a broker, we're listed. What happens if a buyer actually bites?
That's when things get real with due diligence.
Oh boy, what exactly does that entail?
Basically, it's the buyer doing their homework. They're going to scrutinize your financials, your legal documents, every nook and cranny.
Like a financial colonoscopy.
Kind of. They're looking for any red flags, any potential risks.
So transparency is key here, right? No hiding anything.
Absolutely. And this is where all that organization we talked about earlier really pays off.
Our listener was ahead of the game with all their systems and documentation.
Totally. Having everything organized makes this process so much smoother. It shows the buyer you're on top of things.
It's like showing up for a date with your best outfit and a fresh haircut. You want to make a good impression.
Exactly. First impressions matter. And in this case, a well-organized business screams trustworthy.
All right, so we've aced due diligence, everyone's happy. Now comes the part I'm both excited and terrified about. Negotiation. Any tips?
I get it. It can be nerve-wracking, especially for someone who's poured their heart and soul into their business.
Yeah, there's definitely some emotional attachment there.
For sure. But Moran emphasizes the importance of detaching a bit. Remember, this is a business transaction.
Easier said than done.
Right. But try to set clear boundaries beforehand. Know your walkaway point, that price you absolutely won't go below.
So I don't get caught up in the moment and make a rash decision.
Exactly. Having that line in the sand can help you stay grounded, keep things rational.
Okay, solid advice. But let's say we're negotiating, things are going well, and we reach an agreement. What's next?
That's the closing stage, the final hurdle.
So dotting the I's and crossing the T's.
Precisely. Finalizing all the legal stuff, transferring ownership, making sure the transition is smooth for everyone.
Sounds like a job for the lawyers and accountants.
Definitely. This is where having a great team of professionals is essential. They'll guide you through the maze.
So we can finally breathe a sigh of relief.
Exactly. And celebrate. Of course, you've reached the summit.
Champagne showers.
Haha, well deserved. But Moran reminds us that this isn't the end of the journey.
It's just a new beginning, right?
Exactly. The big payday is a stepping stone. What comes next is up to you.
And that's what I'm really curious about. What does Moran suggest we do with all this newfound freedom?
He lays out a ton of possibilities. Reinvesting, pursuing passions, giving back.
Or just taking a well-deserved break, right?
Of course. But the key is to have a plan. What are your goals? What impact do you want to make?
So the big payday isn't just about the money. It's about aligning your life with your values.
Exactly. It's about living a life of purpose and fulfillment on your own terms.
And that's a message I think our listener will really resonate with, given their long-term goal of listeners' long-term goal from notes.
Absolutely. They've got a clear vision, and this could be the catalyst to make it happen.
I'm so excited for them. But what about those who aren't necessarily chasing a big payday? Is there anything in Moran's book for them?
Absolutely. Even if you never plan to sell, The principles of building a sellable business are still incredibly valuable.
Okay, break that down for me.
Think about it. Strong financials, solid systems, a recognizable brand. Those things make any business better.
So it's about applying those same principles, but with a different end goal in mind.
Exactly. And that's what we'll dig into next time, how to build a business that thrives, whether you're selling it or sticking around for the long haul.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground on actually selling your
The
business.
big payday, all that.
Right, but what about those of us who are in it for the long haul? Like, we love what we do, we're not looking to exit anytime soon.
Moran's got you covered there, too.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he actually spends a good chunk of the book talking about building a sustainable business, one that thrives even if you never sell.
That's awesome because honestly, that's more my speed right now.
I hear you. And it aligns perfectly with our listeners' goals, too, right?
Totally. They're all about listeners' long-term goal from notes, which is a long game.
Exactly. And Moran's big on this idea of working smarter, not harder to get there.
Music to my ears. But how do we actually do that? What does working smarter look like in practice?
Well, one thing he emphasizes is building a winning team.
Okay, makes sense. You can't do it all yourself.
Right, especially in a business like our listeners, where specific aspect of listeners' business model is so crucial.
Yeah, they need people they can trust who really understand the nuances.
Exactly. And finding those A players, that's a game changer.
And so any tips on how to do that?
Moran talks about the importance of looking beyond just skills.
Okay, so not just a resume check.
Yep. He says cultural fit is huge, especially in their niche where trust is everything.
So finding people who align with your values, your vision.
Exactly. Building a team that feels like a family, that's the goal.
I love that. But once you've got the right people, how do you make sure everyone's on the same page, working towards the same goals?
That's where data comes in. Moran is a huge data nerd.
I'm sensing a theme here.
Right. He's all about tracking your progress, measuring what matters.
Okay, but with so much data out there, where do you even start?
He says focus on the metrics that directly impact your bottom line.
So things like,
Customer acquisition costs, lifetime value, conversion rates.
okay, those are definitely numbers worth watching.
Absolutely. It's about making decisions based on evidence, not just your gut.
So even if you're not planning to sell, running your business like you are can actually make it way more successful.
Precisely. It forces you to think strategically, to be laser focused on what matters.
This has been so insightful. I feel like I've got a whole new toolkit for building a business that lasts.
I'm glad. And remember, whether you're aiming for a big payday or just a fulfilling journey, the principles are the same.
It's about working smarter, building the right team, and always keeping those long-term goals in mind.
Couldn't have said it better myself. It's been a pleasure diving into this with you.
Likewise. And to our listeners, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into Ryan Moran's 12 months to $1 million. We hope you've gained some valuable insights, whether you're building to sell or building to last.
Keep those entrepreneurial dreams alive, folks.
And we'll catch you on the next deep dive.